Good afternoon, sir.
Wait lang. Hindi ko pala nabago to. Hindi, sa bagay. Nabago ko na pala to sa ano. Ang hindi ko pala nabago yung ano, yung dati kong kinuha. Anyway, so ito. So good afternoon. Dinig ba ako? Wala kasi yung headset kanina nung nagtanong ako. Okay. So, sige no. Actually ano, I do not need ano naman to meet you for a very long time po today. Medyo i-introduce ko lang kayo dito sa ano, sa activity 3. Although this activity 3 should be performed with the lesson on system modeling already done. So hopefully dun sa ating lecture. Again, nag-send ako ng recorded lecture sa inyo. Sa lecture. And I hope that you are progressing, okay, into that ano. So with that in mind, kailangan para ma-perform niyo ng maayos and for you to be able to perform activity 3 in a manner that it would be really helpful to you. Then you must have a background of topics 2 and topics 3. You need a background on those, okay? At least background, a working background, working knowledge on the topics, not necessarily mastery, but at least working knowledge, okay? Yung familiar kayo sa pagkuha ng mga ng equations in a network, okay? And you are familiar with the process on how for example, you can solve for a current. Okay, given you have a three loop network, okay, and so on. So, yun, kailangan meron tayong working knowledge nitong topics 2 and 3 for us to be able to perform or for us to be able to work on activity 3. Okay, pero medyo papasadahan ko yung ibang ideas nito kasi yung ibang ideas nito are on yung mathematical basis nung computer aided solution natin nandito. Okay, pero before I proceed with that, let me just make some announcements. Number 1, nabasa niyo naman yung di ba? Yung tungkol sa reforest for tomorrow. Nabasa niyo ba? Yung announcement na ginawa ko about reforest. Ito. Were you able to read this? Hindi ko alam kung nababasa niyo yung announcement ko or what kasi sabi ko sa inyo sana pagka nabasa niyo siya, mag-react naman kayo. Like hindi man kayo mag-comment, you don't need to make some comments pero baka naman pwedeng mag-like man lang kayo. Okay. So that man lang nalalaman ko man lang na na-access niyo siya or nababasa niyo siya. Here's the thing, minomonitor ko kasi yung activity ninyo dito sa minomonitor ko yung activity ninyo dito sa Teams. So every like, every comment, every message that you send, every meeting that you attend here are being monitored by by Teams. So yun kasi yung those activities or those records of activities are something that might play a role later on pag pinag-usapan na natin yung grades ninyo. Say for example, ito example lang naman to pero mga possible scenarios ito. Say for example, you're on the edge. Your grade is on the edge of either being a numerical grade or an R. Nandun kayo sa ganung kumbaga nag-aalanganin kayo. Or most probably baka nasa R region kayo, nasa R pa yung grade niyo. Pero you might be you might be thinking if there is some way for me to reconsider. So one way that I look into is yung record ng activities niyo. Titingnan ko kung gaano kayo ka-active sa class. Sa mga interactions ninyo, sa attendance ninyo sa sa mga meetings and so on, okay? Which are not really part of the of the grades per se. But they can actually play a role in deciding whether you pass or whether you pass if your grade is somewhat on the boundary of passing. Halimbawa, 74 point, kung ang passing natin ang passing pa natin is I don't know, 60. If our passing grade is 60, halimbawa ang grade niyo ay 59.1 na hindi natin ma-round off sa 60. Pero if we consider na lagi naman 'to umattend, lagi naman niyang nababasa yung mga announcement and nagre-react naman siya sa mga announcement and so on. Active naman siya sa kumbaga I can see that you are engaged in the in the course. Then that may be a point of that may be a point that I can consider that you deserve to pass. Parang ganun yung pwede niyang pag hindi kasi kayo nagre-react, parang wala lang. Hindi ko alam kung ano bang standing niyo sa klase, kung nandiyan pa ba kayo or something like that. Mga ganun. So I would really appreciate that you react on announcements made para alam ko kung nababasa niyo ba siya or ano. Okay. And speaking of this yun na nga itong event. Nag-announce ako na wala naman nag-react. Okay. This event, I would like you to attend tomorrow's meeting. Okay? Total yung iba ko namang sa inyo ay estudyante rin bukas sa lecture. Okay. So, I would like you to attend this meeting tomorrow. Attend this event tomorrow. This is online hindi to sa school. This is online. And first you have to register. There is a registration link here, so you have to do some registration. Okay. The event is from 9 to 5. Okay? And if you have classes, other classes than me during this time, you may be especially kung ang klase nyo ay under ng College of Engineering. Yung faculty is under the College of Engineering. You may be asked to excuse. Pwede naman daw magpa-excuse sabi nung dean natin. Okay, kung magkaklase si prof ninyo. Okay, pero as per our case, we need not to meet tomorrow for this for an online session sa klase sa lecture. Okay? And you just need to attend this event instead. Okay? Online naman to. Okay. In this case, ang gagawin natin is I would be asking for a proof of your attendance into this event. Okay? Plus I would ask you to write a narrative. Okay. So parang magbibigay ako ng questions, okay, in which I would ask you some things about the proceedings of the forums for tomorrow. Okay. And then you would be asked to write a narrative about that. So yung mechanics at saka yung mga questions would come after the event. Siguro baka next week. Okay. Yung ito for this yung narrative na yon tsaka yung proof of attendance, pag naipasa niyo sa akin, would be would give you additional points. Okay? Both sa lahat ng klase na naka-enroll niyo sa akin. But naka-enroll sa akin, sa lahat ng klase niyo na naka-enroll na ako yung may hawak. For example, dito sa lecture tsaka sa laboratory. Okay? Ang tawag dito? Nakalimutan ko tayo sasabihin ko. Ayun, nakalimutan ko talaga. Anak ng, ayun. So, yun na nga, ano, yung, kumbaga, yung, if you are enrolled in lecture and lab na ako yung may hawak sa control systems, yung ipapasa yung narrative at saka yung ipapasa yung proof of attendance, applicable na yun dun sa lahat sa dalawang klase na naka-enroll kayo. Okay, so you just need to submit one. Okay, and then that applies to both. Okay. Para sa kasi sa lecture kasi, i-re-require ko siya as part ng quiz. Okay, it will be required the narrative will be made part of the quiz. Pero sa laboratory, I am thinking of making handing out additional points based dun sa merit nung ipapasa nyo. So ibig sabihin, mas maayos yung ipapasa nyo, mas mataas yung additional points nyo dun sa final assessment dito sa laboratory class. Okay? So, ayun. Is that maliwanag ba yun? Yung tungkol bukas? Okay, makaka-attend ba kayo? Okay. Baka yung ibang courses nyo nire-require kayo to attend. So, ayun. Kasi may advice sa amin na yun na nga, matendo kayo. So, if you haven't yet registered, please do register as soon as you can. Okay, para matanggap nyo rin yung link. In speaking of links, parang hindi ko pa natatanggap yung link para bukas. Hindi ko alam kung nag-send na sila. Wait lang . So, hindi ako sure kung kung nag-send na sila ng nag-send na sila ng links. Okay, anyway, check ito lang mamaya. Nag-send na ba sila ng link kung paano makaka-join sa meeting, sa Teams meeting? Mr. Bacamante? Hindi pa, no? Wala pa rin kasi sa akin eh. Okay, so sige.
Ayun po, sir.
Sige, go.
Ano po, sir? Sorry po.
Nakamit ka, no?
Opo, sir. Kaya makakalita na sir. Pero yun nga, sir, po. Yung sinend po sa aming link is registration lang po.
Registration lang, pero
sa seminars po namin.
Okay, pero wala pa silang sineset na no?
Opo, wala pa po.
Yung kung paano kayo makaka-join bukas. Sige, baka bukas na rin yun. Required din ba siya sa inyo? Sino sa inyo yung required din sa ibang course?
Kami, sir, po kay Sir Bagara po sa seminars po namin.
Okay, so sige, good. At least isang requirement na to. So sa atin din actually it's much more of a requirement. So kung required sa inyo sa ibang course, mas maganda para isa na lang yung matututok natin. And again, yung mga questions that you have to answer with regards sa that should form part of the narrative report that you have to send is i-send ko na lang on a later time. Baka Monday or Tuesday, mga ganun. Kasi nga sa lecture, plano ko maging part siya ng quiz. Okay. Parang Parang isa siyang tanong. Hindi, lalabas parang parang isa siyang tanong sa quiz. Pero hindi siya dadagdag doon sa number of items o sa highest possible score nung quiz. So meaning if the quiz is parang 100 points, kahit idagdag ko yung questions na yon as part ng quiz, 100 points pa rin yung highest possible score. Parang ganun yung mangyayari. Okay. So, but in any case, yun na nga. Pero din sa laboratory, what would happen is that your narrative report and the proof of your attendance would entail you or would garner you additional points sa final assessment natin. So, doon ko siya idadagdag sa final assessment. Additional points siya. Okay? So, questions para bukas? Para sa reforest? Aware ba kayo kung tungkol saan yung yung reforest? Ayun. Tungkol siya sa the forest is a forum that that the College of Engineering has been it's a research forum actually. It's basically a research forum that is centered around environmental sustainability. Okay? It's not necessarily kasi when you say environmental sustainability, it's not necessarily we will talk about climate change agad or something like something like about how do we mitigate climate change and so on and so forth. Hindi kagad tungkol sa climate change ito. This is about environmental sustainability. This is more of like how do we make environment work for us? How do we use the resources provided by the environment without harming the environment itself. Okay, kasi marami sa mga processes that we are trying to use out of our environment is nakakasama. For example, mining. Okay? Mining is a lucrative business. Malaki kikitain mo sa mining kapag meron kang nakitang mina. Okay? But yung proseso kasi, the manner by which we do mining, we practice mining is very detrimental to the environment. Okay? So what we can do is that we may be able to think of number one, alternatives. Okay? Aside from doing this manner of mining, meron bang ibang paraan, okay, so that we can still do mining, profit from it, okay, but without damaging the environment. Okay, so that yung pagmamine natin maging sustainable. Okay? Maging sustainable for us and then for the environment also. Okay. So, yun. Although one of the things that would come out of that forum is medyo naka-focus siguro sa climate change. But environmental sustainability is not about climate change at all. Okay? It's about trying to use the environment or trying to use the resources provided by the environment but in a responsible and a sustainable manner. Ganun yung dating . And us as engineers, kailangan aware tayo sa mga ganung mga issues. Most especially when it comes to environment. Mainly because we are on the forefront of developing technologies. Tayo yung mga engineers yung mga naka-assign para mag-develop ng technology. Okay? So it is hoped that if we are as developers of technology, if we are aware of these environmental issues, then we will be exerting our efforts, okay, towards making these technologies friendly to the environment, and thereby would contribute to sustainable use, okay, of the natural resources. Natural resources are intended to be exploited. Nilagay yan dyan dahil nilikha yan dyan dahil kailangan natin siya for our survival. Okay? Ang hindi natin gusto is abusuhin yung environment so that bigla-bigla na lang na mauubos yung resources na na kakailanganin natin. Tayo, yung generation natin may be able to survive. But how about the next generation? Ganun yung magiging So long-term use of environment of natural resources. Yun yung itatakil natin. So, kaya ano, para sa akin, lalo na, this is control systems. Control systems is basically something that is being used in many of the things that we do whenever it involves technology. Okay, so yung principles ng mga dine-design sa control systems is applicable doon sa pagde-design natin. So, may mga for example, may mga efforts din to integrate environmental concepts with regards to control systems. Okay. Kaya lang, sa totoo lang, I would like it talaga to be integrated. Napakakunti lang talaga kung baga yung mga examples natin, instead of talking about airplanes, elevators, and so on, why not talk about technologies, control systems that pertain to environment. Okay. Sa ngayon kasi napakakonti ng mga materials that I see that is applicable on our case. So kaya hindi ko pa siya talaga na-integrate fully. Pero this is a good this is the tomorrow's forum would actually be a very good a very good venue for us to be aware of some of the environmental issues that that our generation face. Okay. So ayun. So I hope you listen to tomorrow's activities and so on, so that magkaroon kayo ng awareness. Okay. So there. Now, wait lang ayun, sige, nandito na. So let's talk about activity 3. Okay. Sandali lang, sandali lang to. Hopefully in 30 minutes matapos ko to. Anyway, hindi ko naman siya di-discuss ng buo. Okay. Again, I feel like I have written this activity in a manner that this should be a self-learning a self-discovery activity for you. Okay. I just laid out the foundations in the discussion. Okay. But I would just like to point out some of the things that you need to look out for. Okay. So nandito tayo sa we are on this part of teka pala. Let's copy this to the whiteboard. Okay. So, again, this activity should be done, okay, with topics in lecture, with topics 2 and 3, okay, as background. Okay. So, hopefully, the information you have gathered or you have obtained, the knowledge that you have obtained or that you have learned from topics 2 and 3, which basically covers electrical system modeling, mechanical system modeling, okay, and finally electromechanical system, although that electromechanical system is not in particular covered in this topic. Okay, but still these are the systems that that have been covered in topics 2 and 3. Okay, under ng system modeling lesson. Okay. So here, ang gagawin lang natin is that we will support those theoretical knowledge, okay, into and apply them, okay, into this activity, so that actually ganito yun. Ang matututunan nyo dito is something that you can actually use, okay, for you to be able to come up with system models, okay, para kapag tinanong kayo, for example, sa quiz or sa exam in the lecture site, marami sa mga steps na ginagawa natin doon can actually be eliminated. Kasi pwedeng gawin niyo na siya dito. Okay. And that and for my students for my students in the lecture class. Pwede 'yun I mean, sa lecture class nag-aan tayo, nagso-solve tayo, okay? Analytic yung ginagawa natin pagso-solve ng mga problems doon. Okay? Pero during quizzes and exams, okay? Pwede kayong gumamit ng mga methods na matututunan niyo dito ha. Okay lang na gumamit ng Octave or ng MATLAB para makapag-solve kayo ng mga modeling problems. Okay? Pwede 'yun. Basta ang importante, ipe-present niyo lang yung mismong solution niyo. I-present niyo yung code, i-present niyo yung results, how do you interpret the results, mga ganun. Okay? So, pwede 'yun. Now, nga, lumang manual pa to kasi hindi ko pa to napapalitan. Itong part na to. Napalitan ko na to actually. Okay. So, ganito. Now, if you can, if you have some, kung medyo naaral niyo na yung at saka simulan na pa natin to, nag-online session pala tayo this last Tuesday. So, halimbawa, kung maaalala nyo, in electrical networks, okay, we will be able to generate what we call mesh equations. Okay? So, we have learned how to, we have learned how to generate these mesh equations. Okay? And that's in terms of electrical networks. While in mechanical systems, these are called equations of motion. Okay? So, if your electrical network, for example, has multiple loops. Okay? If your equation has two or more loops, or if your mechanical system has two or more degrees of freedom which your object can move. Okay, we measure the complexity of mechanical system in terms of how many movements can you actually establish in that system. So if you can establish two or more independent motions of your objects, okay, in that system, then we say that your system has two or more degrees of freedom. Okay, yun yung ibig sabihin natin dito. Okay, and sa electrical network, familiar naman tayo with what we mean by having your system or having two or more loops in your electrical network. Okay? So, if this is your case, for electrical networks, if you have two or more loops, or for mechanical system, if you have two or more DOFs, degrees of freedom of motion, okay, the resulting model, okay, or the resulting equations that describe your system would actually be a linear system. Okay, magkakaroon kayo ng set of linear equations. Okay, kung maaalala niyo yung lecture natin last time, meron akong electrical network having 3 loops. Okay? Or 2 loops pala. 2 loops pala yung pinag-usapan natin. Ito yun, balikan ko lang yung nasa lecture natin. Ito yung diniscuss ko last time, di ba? Kung naalala niyo to. Naalala niyo ba to? Sa mga sa mga estudyante ko sa lecture. Okay, katulad nito. Okay, I have here an electrical network having 3 loops, 1, 2, and 3. So I assign 3 currents there, I1, I2, and I3. Okay? Now, what would happen is that kapag in-establish ko yung network equations nito, what would be generated is a system of 3 equations. Okay? Meron tayong system of 3 equations having three unknowns. Yung I1, yung I2, and then yung I3. So we call this a system of equation or equations. Okay? So that same scenario would be possible kapag meron naman kayo mechanical system having multiple loops. I mean having multiple degrees of freedom. Okay? For example, in a mechanical system such as say this one, okay, such as this one, okay, we were able to come up with a system of equations something like this. So makikita nyo ngayon, two equations yan because I have two unknowns. Okay, I have two unknowns here. Ang unknowns ko ay x1, yung displacement nito nung una kong object, ito. That's the first unknown. Okay, and x2, which is this one. So, this system has two degrees of freedom. Okay, because two objects can move and each object can actually move independently. Parang halimbawa, pwede kong ipin sa location niya, sa present location niya, si M2, this object, I would pin it so that it wouldn't be able to move. But still, I could be able to move M1. Okay, it's possible that I could move M1. So that's 1 degree of freedom already. And then, I can do that same thing with M1. That is, I would pin M1. Okay, I would pin M1 in its place. Okay, I'll pin it M1 here para hindi siya makagalaw. And then I would try to move M2. Okay? So M2 can still move. So that's my second degree of freedom. Okay? So in that case, if I have 2 degrees of freedom, okay, it means that this system can be described by two equations. Again, if I have 2 degrees of freedom, the number of equations that would describe the system is 2. Okay? Kung medyo nalilito kayo dito sa konsepto ng degrees of freedom. Simply put, kung ilan yung object na pwede nyo pagalawin dyan, yan yung number of degrees of freedom ng system niyo. Since there are two objects, yung objects nyo as mass. Again, we define matter to be anything that has mass. Okay? And occupies space. So, if we are talking about objects that can move, okay, then we're talking about objects having masses. Kaya kung ilan yung masses nyo dyan, yun yung number of degrees of freedom niyo. So in this case, since you have two masses, then you have two degrees of freedom, and therefore you have equations, or you have two equations that would completely describe the system. Maliwanag ba yan? Okay. So going back. So if that is the case, okay? If that is the case, then modeling electrical or mechanical networks having multiple or whose description would actually become a system of equation. Okay? Requires knowledge of solving these linear systems. Okay? So, kailangan natin magkaroon ng method. Okay? Under ng linear equations, okay? Or linear systems. In order for us to be able to solve the unknowns, okay, in these systems. So, yung first part ng activity niyo is actually laying the foundation. Kung actually dalawa yung binigay kong possible solutions dito or possible methods of solution. Okay, number one, ang binigay ko dito first is the Cramer's rule. Okay, ang binigay ko dito is Cramer's rule. I have mentioned here that there are various ways. Okay, you can solve this using the method of Gauss elimination and back substitution. Pwede yan. You can use Cramer's rule. Okay, you can use solutions that involve inverses. inverse matrices, okay? And so on. Marami tayong methods. Pero dito sa activity nito, I primarily concentrated on number 1, Kramer's rule. Kasi ang concern naman natin is to solve control systems engineering problem. Okay? We are not really concerned with numerical methods on how to solve these things. Mas concern natin is yung makakuha tayo ng model and then use the model to simulate. Okay? This part, itong part na to, actually is just a method for us to medyo i-lessen sa atin yung computational burden. Okay? Kasi instead na solve tayo ng mga ganito, ng mga linear equations katulad niyan by hand, okay? We can instead focus more on the analysis side. That is, we let the computers do the computation, and then whatever the results is we try to what we will try to interpret and analyze and digest in order for us to determine what really happens with our system. Kaya yung mga computational burden, hangga't maaari, tatanggalin natin sa atin. That is why I am suggesting that if you really find, or if you learn this stuff, okay, if you learn how to use MATLAB in order for you to come up with models, when you are asked to come up with models, then please do maximize the use of these tools. Ang kailangan ko lang is ipaliwanag niyo sa akin paano siya nangyari, so that I know that so that I have evidences that you know what you are doing. Okay? So as I was stating earlier, dahil nga sa hindi naman natin concern yung methods, ang concern natin is yung solution or yung answer. Okay? That is why I laid out na lang yung mga simpleng methods. So number 1 nga is Kramer's rule. Kasi ginagamit din natin siya sa actually yung Kramer's rule na ginagamit natin is by hand. Okay? Kung doon sa lecture, kung maaalala niyo tong part na to. Ayun, hindi ko sinolve sa inyo to. Hindi ko pala sinolve sa inyo tong mamaya sige, subukan natin kung alam ko may nadaanan ako ditong example ng may makita akong example dito ng ayun. Sige, mamaya may nadaan tayong example. Okay, so ayun. Okay, so ganito. Yun nga, una, Kramer's rule. Okay. And number two is MATLAB calls it kalimutan ko yung term niya. I-review ko pero it's more like a backslash division operation. Okay? Yung symbol ng the symbol for division in most computer applications is yung forward slash, tama? Ito yung most common symbol of division na ginagamit sa mga computer languages and computer apps. Okay? What MATLAB means by backslash division is that you perform division but using this operator itself. Okay? And later in this activity, you would see how this would actually generate answers. Okay? So, ayun, yun yung dalawang methods that we will use here. Okay. So, number 1, say for example, you are given this kind of system. Okay, you are given this kind of system. By Kramer's rule, ito yung magiging solution niya. Okay? So that is, yung x1 nyo is d1 over d, x2 is d2 over d, and x3 is d3 over 3. Now, ano yung d1, ano yung d2, ano yung d3, at ano yung d? Okay, what are these? Okay. Okay. These are determinants. Okay, basically, these are determinants. Okay? Now, the elements of these determinants are actually based on this system. For example, yung matrix D, okay? The matrix D contains the matrices, contains the coefficients of the unknowns. Okay? So, ang mga unknowns nyo dito is yung x1, x2, at saka x3. Okay? Their coefficients are this. Okay? And these coefficients would form part as your let's call this simply D determinant. O sometimes sa discussion ko tinatawag ko tong coefficient determinant. Because simply they originate from the coefficients. Okay? And that is your D determinant. Okay? Or the coefficient determinant. Now, from there, you can actually solve D1, okay, D2, and D3. Okay. These determinants, D1, D2, and D3, corresponds to the determinants related to your unknowns. Okay. These determinants are related to the unknowns. Okay. For example, yung D1 should be associated with X1, your first unknown. Okay. Yung D2 is associated with X2, your second unknown. And your D3 is associated with X3. Okay? Sa lecture, ang ginagamit ko symbol dyan, instead of D1, I use DX1 para mas mas intuitive. Okay, so you know that DX1 is the determinant associated with the unknown X1. Okay? And how do you compute this? Okay, how do you compute this? You simply start from the coefficient determinant and then replace the column, okay? Replace the column that corresponds to the associated unknown with that determinant. Okay? Halimbawa, D1. Okay? D1 is associated with X1. Now, X1, in this coefficient determinant, the coefficients for X1 are in the first column. So, what you do to compute D1 is to replace the first column. Okay? With what? With these numbers. Yung right side, column vector or yung right side vector. Let's simply call this the constants vector or the constants na lang. So we go basically B1, B2 and B3 are constants, okay? So ang gagawin natin is that to solve D1 or the determinant associated with X1, your first variable, okay? Is to replace the column or replace the coefficients of X1 with our constants. So that is why, since itong buong column na to pertains to X1, take note, A11, A21, tsaka A31 are coefficients of X1. So they are on the first column. So what we do is this first column, in this first column is to replace these coefficients, A11, A21, and A31, with the constants, B1, B2, and B3. And that is how you evaluate B1. Same thing with D2. Okay, D2 is associated with X2. Okay, and X2 is at the second column, or X2 coefficients are in the X2 column, or in the second column, I mean. So there, you replace this X2, or column 2, with the constants. Okay? Now, kung kompleto yung network niyo, ibig sabihin your network is fully determined. Okay? That is, yung number of unknowns nyo is equal to the number of equations that you have. So in here kasi we have 3 unknowns, so we have 3 equations. So anto, fully determined yung tawag dito. So this case is called a fully determined system. Okay? Now, what we do is we replace now the second column with B1, B2, and B3. And we should have not problems in that replacement. Mainly because yung number of rows nito, okay, should equal do sa number of rows nung unang matrix niyo. Otherwise kasi kapag halimbawa meron kayong 4 equations in 3 unknowns. Okay, this is an underdetermined system. Overdetermined pala ito. This is an overdetermined system because you have more equations, okay, than unknowns. Pero what you would see here is that yung size nito dapat maging 4 by 3. Kasi yung rows corresponds to the number of equations that you have. And then yung 4 corresponds to the number of unknowns. Okay. So since you have 4 equations in 3 unknowns, it means yung size dapat nito. If this came from from a system, okay, from an overdetermined system, okay, the size of this should be 4 by 3. So dapat meron siyang 4 na equations, 1, 2, 3, and then 4. There's the 4th equation, halimbawa. Okay? And then you have 3 unknowns. This one, this one, this one. So kapag ginawa nyo to, medyo may problema kasi you have to substitute this here, 4 yung niyan. 4 yung rows niyan. Pero ganito pala. Actually, to kasi kung 4 yung equations nyo, you also have 4 constants. Okay, there should be 4 elements of this if you have 4 equations. Okay? So ayun. Pero sa cases na ginagawa natin o sa mga most of the cases that we have to solve are actually regular they are just your regular Joes. They are just the simplest problem that we could have. Okay, in which all are regular matrices. Okay, wala namang overdetermined or underdetermined doon. Okay, so you should not have problem in making this substitution. Okay, and then of course you evaluate if you are using MATLAB, you have to evaluate these determinants using the function det, and then place here the name of the matrices that contains these values. Say for example that is on the matrix A. So that A when commanded or when issued as command in MATLAB evaluates the determinant of the matrix A. Okay, so ibig sabihin kung kaya natin mag-determine or kaya natin mag-compute ng determinant, then we can do this operation. Okay, this operation is simply just shall I say computable? Pwede siyang gawin. Okay, it can be done in MATLAB or we can use MATLAB to aid us in performing the calculations. Okay, so for example ito. You have here a 3 equations to a unknown problem. Okay, so ang ginawa natin dito is that we define each matrix coefficient by column. Okay, so yung first column is under ng D1. Okay, yung second, this is the first column. Lagyan natin C1 for column 1. So this is column 1, this is column 2, and this is column 3. Napansin ba? I'm talking about this problem. Napansin ba siya? Itong tatlo na to, nandito, ano ba na gets or na figure out niyo ba to? Okay, na yung D1 is yung first column. Okay, D2 is yung second, and yung D3 is yung third column. Delayed ba tayo o wala lang sumasagot sa inyo? Update, nag-email na sila. Nag-email sila sa akin kaninang alas 12. Yung Reforest, I'm talking about Reforest. Yun, nag-email na sila. So I'd let you check out kung nag-email na sila. Kasi baka mamaya i-forward ko itong link. Kanya-kanya pala tayo siya. Pero alam ko hindi naman dapat . Register lang din. Register nga lang. Yun lang talaga yung in-email nila. Wala silang in-email na link pa. Okay, so sige. Anyway, so going back to our discussion. Okay, so ayun. Ang tawag ito? So, ginawa ko is hiniwa-hiwalay ko yung per column para madali din magpalit. Okay? Kasi what can we do is that For example, if you need this, if you need to form the coefficient matrix out of this, okay, you can just simply append these columns. Okay. If you have something like D1, okay, and then D2, okay, D2, and D3 there, okay, and D1 is basically yung column na 1, 6, and 5, okay. D2 is 1, negative 4, 2, and yung D3 nyo is 1, 5, and 2, okay. Then, by doing this operation, okay, by appending them, okay, horizontally, then you can generate the coefficient determinant. Okay, so yun yung ginawa natin dito. In-append natin yung columns of matrices so that we will form the coefficient matrix or the coefficient determinant. And then there is where we solve the determinant now. Okay, that is where we solve the determinant. Now, the next thing that we have to solve, okay, this is now your D. Ito ngayon yung D na yun. Okay, that solves this D. Okay, now for us to be able to solve D1, D2, and D3, okay, we have to establish first yung from the determinant perspective. Okay, kailangan yung first natin, for example, if we are solving for D1, okay, again, we need to replace these coefficients, okay, with these constants. So what I do, I define this constants in another vector, which is B. Ito, tatakpan ko pala. Okay. So there. There's your this is your constant vector. Okay, yan yung 231 tsaka 13. Okay? So that when I solve B1, when I solve D1, I mean, okay, I just simply put B in the first column so that magiging 2, 31, and 13 yan. And then followed by D2, which is 1, negative 4, and 2. Okay, and then D3, which is 1, 5, 2. And then I'll compute the determinant of this using the function det. So the same thing with D2. Again, ang i-replace natin with D2 is yung second column. So that should solve the second set of variables, which is in this case y. Okay, and D3, okay, can be solved by replacing this third column with the constants. Okay, and then we apply Cramer's rule. Ito na yung i-apply natin yung Cramer's rule. Ito. That is, we solve x1 by dividing d1 with d. Just take note that d1 is the determinant associated with the first unknown, which is x1. So in this case, we can solve x. Okay, we can solve x by dividing d1 with d. d1 here is the determinant associated with the first variable, which is x. And again, their association is that in the coefficient matrix, we have replaced the first column. The first column is the column containing the coefficients of the first unknown. Okay, so that first column, the elements of that first column was replaced with constants. So yun yung association with d1 and the first variable, which is x. So ganun din with y and with c. Okay, so using this command, I hope that you can be able to answer question 1, 2, and 3. By the way, yung question 2 is more of like a background on determinants. Not really part of this Okay. This pertains to a analytic by hand solution. Okay. Baka sagutin niyo ako nito ng how does one solve determinants of order 3 or higher? Baka sagutin niyo ako dito ng use MATLAB. I was pertaining to yung other analytic or by hand solutions. And then you apply the things you have learned here, okay, to these problems. I-apply niyo siya dito. Okay? Okay ba tayo? Okay. Now let us try to apply that that Kramer's rule into the network. Kasi here's the thing. You might have you might recall that you might be able to recall that nung ginawa natin yun sa electrical circuit, when we solve electrical circuits, yung sinusolve nyo puro may mga S. Okay? May mga may mga S's siya. Okay? For example, nung kinuha natin yung transfer function na ito. Okay? When we attempted to solve for this transfer function, mapapansin nyo merong S siya. May mga S yan. So, yung current na pinag-usapan natin with regards sa Kramer's rule, you might be thinking, sir, yung example niyo dito is numerical. Okay? So, there should be no problem. Okay? There should be no problem with applying MATLAB in that case. Okay? Walang magiging problema sa MATLAB ito dahil numerical naman yung problem. Here, I'm talking about this. So it's okay. Wala tayong problema diyan. Ang problema natin, what if katulad siya nito na may mga variable siya? I mean, talking about variable S. Okay? And V kasi baka na rin alam yung V. Okay. In that case, you can actually use yung symbolic operations. So that is why as a background also, you need activity 2 para magawa niyo tong activity 3. Okay? So, ayun. Paano ba natin gagamitin yung symbolic calculations? Basically, it should start with us, okay, defining a symbolic variable. Okay? So in this case, in case of this this network, okay? In case of this network, medyo maliit siya, no? Malabo ba siya? Okay. So ganito kita niyo ba yung yung diagram? Parang labo pa lang. Kita naman. Okay. Ililinaw ko lang yung mga values this is 1. This is 1 over S. This is 4S. This is 1 ohm. This one, yung resistor dito. This is 2S. This is 3S. Meron ba akong di na-identify? Okay na. Na-identify ko lahat, di ba? 1, 1, 1 over S, 4S, 2S, 3S. Okay, so what we need to know first is how to actually generate these mesh equations. Okay? Which was our lesson last time. Okay. Pero ganito siya. Just to summarize how to obtain the Okay. So you have 3 currents. I1. Okay, this is I1. This is I2. Okay, and this is I3. Okay? So you have 3 currents. So you expect that you have 3 loop equations. Okay? So if you have 3 loop equations, you identify which current, okay, is being considered, okay, or which current is flowing inside that loop. Okay, for example, for loop 1, for your first loop, which is this one, okay, loop 1, okay, in loop 1, current I1 flows. Okay, so ibig sabihin, pwede niyong isipin na yung I1 ang bida dito sa loop 1. Okay? So, what you need to do, okay, is to find the sum of impedances, okay, that are connected to I1 or that is being passed by yung dinadaanan. I don't know how to hindi ko alam paano translate yung dinadaanan sa English ng ng medyo maganda-gandang pakinggan. Yung dinadaanan, yung mga impedances that are dinadaanan nung I1, i-add natin siya. And that should take a positive sign. Okay, again, the impedances, okay, that are associated with the current flowing inside the loop should be positive. And all other impedances is negative or are negative. So in this case, all impedances associated with I1 is positive. And those are ito, at saka ito. So the sum of this is 1 plus 1 plus 2s. So that should be 2s plus 1 times I1. Okay. Nakuha ba yun? Yung kung paano ko nakuha itong term na to? Okay. Just simply add the impedances. Okay. That is associated with I1. O yung dinadaanan ng I1. So that is 1, 1, this one, and this one. Okay. Okay. And then all other impedances are now negative. Okay. So since ang susuot ko dito is yung the next impedances here, okay, should be multiplied to I2. Okay? And the impedances here, unang-una negative yan. Number 2, the impedances here are sum of impedances that is common to I2 and I1. Kung ano yung parehong dinadaanan ng I1 tsaka I2. Which in this case, ito. Okay, so the total impedance that is common to I1 and I2 is 2s plus 1. Mali pala ako dito. This is 2s plus 2. Ano nga ba siya? 1 plus 1 plus 2s. So that should be 2s plus 2. Okay? And then ito, since I2 nga yung kukunin ko dito, the impedances here should be the sum of impedances common to I1 and I2. Which in this case, this one. So yun na nga, 2s plus 1 siya. Okay? And then finally, I need, the third term, okay, would be multiplied to I3. Okay, and the impedances here, number 1 is negative. Okay, and number 2, what is common between I3 and I1? Okay, what is common? What is the sum of common impedances between I3 and I1? And seeing it from your diagram, ito yung I1, ito yung I3. Yung common na dinadaanan nilang dalawa is itong resistor na to. Okay, which has an impedance of 1. So this is simply 1. Okay? So since tatlong terms na yan, I1, I2, and I3, wala na tayong ibang current sa system natin. Then we can proceed with writing the right side of that equation. Okay, and that right side is actually the voltage connected to loop 1, which in this case, simply this one. Yung Laplace transform nito. So basically, that's Bs. Okay, or simply let's write it as V. Okay. Maliwanag yung first equation? Okay. Yung second equation. So, sa second equation, loop 2, okay, gawin natin bida si I2. So, which means, in this second equation, yung impedances associated with I2 should be positive. And all other impedances should be treated as negative. Okay? So, in this case, since I1 tayo nagsimula dito sa, sa first column ninyo, then sundan natin yan ng I1 din. Okay? And we need to find the sum of impedances that is connected, that is common to I1 and I2. Which we will find later, yung impedances na associated sa kanya. So we need to find the impedances that is common to I2 and I1. Which in this case, eto nga. Okay, ito siya. That's 2s plus 1. But again, since we are on loop 2 where I2 is the main current or is the bida current, okay, then this coefficient should be negative. And so this is 2s plus 1. Okay? And then for I2. So again, since bida dito yung I2, okay, the impedances associated with I2 should be positive. And then we determine now what are the sum of these impedances that is connected to directly to I2. So makikita natin na ito yan. Ito, 2S. Okay. Plus itong resistor. So plus 1, 2S plus 1. Plus itong inductor na to. So that makes it 6S. 6S plus 1. And then another inductor, okay, which has a 3S impedance. So all in all, you have 2 plus 4, that's 6 plus 3, 9. So 9S plus 1. That's the total impedance for I2 or associated with I2. Okay. Nasusundan ba ako? I hope that this is something that that you understand even if anyway, nasa PFED naman na kayo, so medyo I believe proficient naman na kayo sa mga ganito. Okay. Ayan. And then finally, since we will be writing the impedances that is common to I3 and I1, I3 and I2. Okay? This should take a negative sign. And then let's see ano yung common kay I2 at saka kay I3. So yung common sa kanila is ito. Yan yung common na dadaanan nila, this impedance. So 4S. So this should be 4S. And then after the third column, wala tayong current na ibang titingnan. So we write now the right side constant here. In which case, we look for voltages, okay, connected to this to this loop, which in this case wala naman. So we make that constant 0. Okay? Maliwanag to yung pagkuha ng second equation? Okay. Now, I would leave the determination of the third equation on your discretion. Sabihin, try to figure out paano makukuha tong third equation na to. Okay, so that you would be you would be consistent with what we have discussed here. Okay, so ito yung sinasabi ko. That since we're dealing with impedances. Okay? Yung equations na makukuha nyo are not really would contain variables of S. Okay, may ito 2S plus 2, 2S plus 1. Meron siyang variable of S. So in this case, this is the point where we will have to use yung symbolic operations. This is where the symbolic operations of MATLAB, okay, or Octave would really be useful. Okay? And then meron ditong code that could actually help you accomplish that. Okay, may code naman diyan. Okay. So by the way, these instructions are limited to Octave. Okay, pero even so, this code or this script would actually also work for MATLAB. Okay? Then tingnan niyo lang din yung technique. Yung technique na ginamit ko dito is constant with the technique that I have used in the previous discussion. Kung ano yung technique kung ano yung approach na ginamit ko dito, okay, na ginamit natin sa mga commands dito, are the same approach that we are using here. Yung approach na ginagamit natin dito. Okay? So what would result is you have now an expression for I1, I2, and I3. You would be able to solve I1, I2, and I3. Okay. So bibigyan niyo sa inyo yung mismong expression na yun. Okay? Maliwanag ba? Do we have questions so far? May questions ba kayo? Okay, wala naman. Okay. Now, again, ang kailangan nyo is for you to be able to to support your solutions sa sa problem solving such as this one. Okay. If you can if you can remember yung discussion natin do sa lecture 1. If you are looking for transfer functions, if you are looking for transfer functions, for example, you are looking for I2 over Vs. Okay, that required us first to solve for I2. Okay? And then after solving for I2, okay? After solving for I2, then we simply divide that I2 with V so that we get I2 over Vs. Okay? So that in this case, if you are asked to find I2 over V, I1 over Vs, okay? Then you really need to determine what is I1. Okay? Ito na nga yun. Kung ano yung ilalabas ng command na to, that is I1. So simply, for you to be able to get G, okay, or G1, okay, simply divide that I1, okay, divide that I1 with the symbolic variable V. Okay? And mind you, we have already defined that as a symbolic variable. So magagamit yun na kagad dyan. Okay? So if you divide I1 with V, again, this is using MATLAB. Okay? You'll be able to get G1. Makukuha nyo kagad yung sagot nyo dito. Yun nga lang, sorry. You should be able to recognize kung nagawa niyo ng activity 2, you should be able to recognize that not all symbolic operations would actually return answers that in the form that you really are familiar with or you really like it to be. Minsan yung binibigay nilang form o binibigay na form nung sagot nung symbolic operations are not really that clean. Okay? They're sometimes not that readable. Most especially if you're using MATLAB. Okay? I recommend this Hindi ko na siya nilalagay dito because this use Octave. And Octave results for symbolic operations tend to be readable, okay? Compared to MATLAB. Pero para maging readable din yung sa MATLAB, use the function pretty. Okay, for example, pagkatapos yung gawin nito, say G1 equals I1 over V. Okay, you can actually type in pretty G1. Okay. So that yung magiging result is something that you can read, especially kung may mga fractional parts ito. Kasi ang gagawin ng MATLAB diyan, ilalagay niya yan sa isang sa isang line. Yung sagot niya, ilalagay sa isang line. So that may not be readable to you. Okay? That possibly is hard to read. Okay? Pero yun na nga, you can actually use the command pretty so that it may be legible. Okay, mas matitingnan niyo siya na mas mabuti. Okay? So, ayun. But in the case that you are looking, for example, for VL, okay? In the case that you're looking for VL, then you need first to determine which current is associated with VL. So, ano ba yung VL? VL is ito. Okay, ito yung VL. Yung voltage across this inductor. Okay, so if that is VL, okay, then you first determine what is the current associated with VL or what is the current that passes through the component that produces VL. So since VL is produced by this component, this inductor, and this current I2 is the one passing through this inductor, okay, then we say that VL, okay, is associated with I2. Okay? And and at this point, you apply Ohm's law here. Recall, Ohm's law states that voltage equals, that the voltage is proportional to the current, okay, with the resistance or the impedance as the proportionality constant. So that's Ohm's law. So in the case of VL, okay, you can find an expression for VL as equal to the current passing through that component that produces VL, okay, and the impedance of the component, okay, that produces VL, which in this case 3S. So therefore, we have VL equals ang tawag ito? 3S times I2. Eh yung I2 na solve nyo na dito. You were able to get I2 from here. Okay. So you simply define, okay? You see to be able to solve VL, you simply define VL as I2 3S, okay, 3 times S times yung na-solve yung I2 na current dito. Okay? And that should give you VL. But if you need VL over VS as a transfer function, okay, edi diretsuhin nyo ng ano to. So this one, 3 times S times I2. Okay. Idiretso nyo nang i-divide dyan ng ano, ng V. And that should give you your G4. Okay, that should give you your G4. Diretso na yan. Ito na kasi yung ano, ito na kasi yung VL niyo. This is your VL. And then dividing VL with V. Okay, computes the transfer function G4. Okay? Is this clear? Okay. So, question number 7 tsaka 8 requires your background of getting the equations for this system and for this system. Kailangan niyo ng background para diyan. So nasa nasa lecture nga. You'll be able to get that from the lecture. Okay? So, yan. Same thing with this one. Nasa yung background nito nasa lecture din. Okay? And here you will be simply using ito pa may pala dito. May script. Okay. So, if you actually ang tawag ito? If you actually study this set of codes, okay, which applies into this one, you would see that MATLAB or Octave here is simply used as a way to compute, okay, way lang siya para ma-compute nyo yung transfer function. So instead of actually doing this by hand, you actually find that you can use your MATLAB or your Octave as a way to make them compute these things for you. Okay? So kung medyo ma-master nyo to, again, pwede nyo gamitin to as part of the solutions for your quizzes or your exams. Pwede itong gamitin sa lecture. Kasi yun nga yung point kung bakit associated yung lecture with this lab. So we learn from the lecture and then we learn to use we learn from in lab class, we learn from the lecture class, and then we try to implement what we learn in lab class into the lecture class. Parang ganun yung sistema natin dito. Okay? So, ayan. Now, so the first method was Cramer's rule. This is the second method. Okay? And in this second method, ang pinaka-basis nito is that linear systems can actually be written as in its matrix form. So this is the general notation of a system of equations written in matrix form. So meron tatlong matrices na involved dito tatlong matrices. Pero in particular, a matrix and 2 column vectors. Okay? So yung A dito is a matrix, which is this one. Yung X na to is a column vector, okay? And B is another column vector. Isa-isahin natin. A is the coefficient matrix. Similar, okay? Elements are similar to the coefficient determinant D. Okay? Ito yung ginagamit natin sa Cramer's rule kanina. But mind you, matrices and determinants are not the same. Okay? Pero in this case, kung ano yung elements nito, yun din yung elements nito. It's just that we use the term coefficient matrix and not determinants. Because we will use A as a matrix. Okay? So kukunin lang natin yung coefficients nung coefficients nung unknowns ninyo. Okay? And then make a matrix out of it. That's A. Okay? Now X is a column vector of all your unknowns. So X here is the unknowns. Unknown variables. Okay? So yan, x1, x2, xn hanggang xn. Okay? And remember that the operation here is matrix multiplication. So that there should be a certain conformability requirements when you multiply A and X. Okay? And that that conformability requirements state that dapat yung number of columns nito, the number of columns of A should equal the number of rows of X. Okay, for example, in a typical problem, say for example, you have three equations in three unknowns. Okay? Katulad nito. Katulad itong problem natin. We have here three equations and three unknowns. Okay? So yung three equations natin would form the coefficient, yung coefficients ng mga unknowns natin would form a matrix A of size 3 by 3. Okay? While yung X natin would form a column vector having 3 rows and 1 column. Kasi yan yung unknown nyo eh. Yan yung I1. For example, I'm talking about this case. I1, I2, and I3. So you have 3 unknowns. Kaya meron kang 3 columns, 3 rows, 1 column. So dapat, again, for you to be able to multiply A and X, for you to be able to multiply A and X, okay, dapat ito at saka ito equal. These two numbers or these two quantities should be equal. So in this case, they are equal. So therefore, we can multiply A and X. There will be a product. Okay. And actually, that product should be this entire equation. Pag binultiply niyo yan, okay, the product should be this equation itself. Okay? Ito yung magiging equation, ito yung magiging product ng A at ng X. Okay. Then, yung B, finally yung B, okay, is basically yung column vector ng constants niyo. So, that simply is, for example, in this case, B, 0, 0. Okay. So, again, yung shortcut notation yan is this. A times X equals B. What we need to solve is B. X. We need to solve for X kasi yung X yung naglalaman ng unknown variables. So, we need to solve for X. A method by which we can solve for X is this one. Okay. That is, we multiply the inverse of matrix A to the column vector B. Okay. So, yung MATLAB command na ito, this MATLAB command, okay, this formula actually translates to MATLAB command in this manner. Okay. So, pag ito in-implement sa MATLAB, ito yung command na yan. But, instead of actually using this command, we will use this. Okay. Instead of using inverse, okay, and then, instead of having your MATLAB, compute the inverse of A, and then the resulting matrix would be multiplied to B. Instead of doing those in 2 steps, you can actually use this one, okay, and perform the process in a more efficient manner. Medyo hindi kasi efficient yung computation ng inverse. Okay, medyo medyo madumi. Medyo maraming round-offs. So kapag ka ang matrix ninyo ay medyo in numerical methods we call it ill-conditioned. If hindi maganda yung lagay ng matrix ninyo, okay, there is a tendency for this operation to actually contain so much error. Kahit na tama yung command niyo, kahit na tama yung pagkakalagay niyo ng mga elements, but if the matrix is ill-conditioned, okay, maaaring yung computations niyo itself, the computer itself would cause errors in the results. So that is why instead of using this, okay, use this. So ito yung sinasabi ko rin ng backslash operator. Yun, left division ang tawag niya doon. Right division yung tawag kasi ng MATLAB sa ganito. We call this left division. Okay? Is this clear? Yung proseso na to? Now, I think I have redone. Okay? Ito. Ito na pala yung ito na pala yung kayo sa inyo ko pala ipapagawa yung redo. Okay. You can actually redo yung equation, yung solution nito. Okay. But this time use the MATLAB the left division. Okay. Pero this time first when you redo that part, okay, first you need not to define now your matrices in terms of columns. Pwede niyo siyang idiretso as A. So in this case, for example, this one, pag dinefine niyo yan as matrix A, i-type ko na nga lang. Malaki ba ba font nito? Maliit na. Adjust lang ako ng font. Natin 18. Okay. Ito i-define natin to. Zoom natin. Okay. I-define natin siya sa MATLAB. Okay, we simply do this. Okay. Wait lang. Ayun. Yung aso ko hindi mapakali. May something yata siya nakita. Tapang-tapangan pa naman yun. Akala mo naman napakatapang niya. Okay, so ayun. We define this this coefficients into matrix form. Okay? So ganito gagawin natin. So of course, you first define the symbolic variable. Dalawa yung in-anticipate nating symbolic variables there. That is yung S at saka yung V. Those are the symbolic variables that we will be using. So we define sims S at saka V. Okay? So A, when you define A, kunin nyo lang yung coefficients nung I1, I2, and I3. Okay, so for example, yung first element natin, ito, yung 2S plus 2, okay, is defined in MATLAB as 2 times S plus 2. Okay? Then use a comma to define the next element, next row, next column, which is this one. Okay, ganito yung pag-define ko, no? Ito muna, ang isusulat ko, ito, first, then I'll do this, second, and then this, yung negative 1 dito. Okay, and then, susundan ko nito, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, nasundan ako, yung gagawin. Okay, so there. So, yun yung first element. Tapos yung second element, this one, is negative. Ito i-recommend ko lang. When you are defining matrices, and when you are defining matrices, it is a very good practice to separate columns by comma. instead of a white space. Take note na pwede nyo gamitin yung white space as a separator between columns. For example, ito. Pwede ko naman itong i-separate lang space lang. Then I'll type -2 or -2 times 2s plus 1. Pwede naman yan. Okay? But it is more recommended to separate them using a comma. Bakit? Dito kasi mas definite yung separation nyo. Mas separate yung delimiter nyo. Mas definite siya. Okay? Sigurado kayo na these are two distinct elements. Kasi minsan, may mga students na nagkakamali dyan sa paggamit niyan. Especially, halimbawa ganito. They would like to write 230 and 0 as separate elements. Okay, so minsan, nagagawa nila yun na 230 as 0. Pwede naman yan. Kaya lang minsan, may mga students na nalilito dyan na minsan hindi nilalagyan ng space. So parang nai-interpret nila dyan, nai-interpret nila yung entry as 2,300. Whereas ang tamang entry is dapat 230 and 0 as separate numbers. So para mas definite yung separation, lagyan nyo ng comma. Yan, sigurado kayong 230 and 0 yan. Okay. And by the way, sa MATLAB, you don't write numbers with comma. Ibig sabihin, di ba sanay tayo sa papel? When we write, say for example, 3,000. Okay, we write it as 3, tas 000. Di ba ganyan yung practice natin? Sa papel, sa papel. You don't do that in MATLAB or in Octave. Because what MATLAB or Octave would do is that they would treat 3 and 000 as separate numbers. Okay. So, comma is used for delimitation, not for writing numbers in comma convention. Okay. So, ayun. So, that's our second element. And then our third element is -1. Okay? And then, either you use semicolon to introduce the next column. The next row. Okay? Or you use space for that. Enter. You use new line pala for that. So, pwede yun. Actually, mas maganda to kasi mas makikita nyo yung matrix nyo. Like for example, this second row consists of the following elements: negative 2s, 2 times s plus 1. And then we have 9 times s plus 1. And then negative 4s, 4 times s as your second element. And then again, press enter para makapasok kayo sa third row. So that's -1. Okay. And then negative 4s. Okay. And then you have positive 4 times s plus 1. Okay. Plus 1 over s. Okay. So, and that's how you write your command. Ito, pag transfer ko tong command na to sa command window by simply copying and pasting it lang. Okay. Yan yung lalabas. Hindi pala siya lalabas kasi nakalimutan ko pala yung sieves. Ayun. Tsaka, yun, buti nakita rin niya. Kaya rin ng asterisk yun. Okay, so, there. So, ayan. So that's how you define now your A. So other things, bukod sa i-define niyo yung A niyo, you also have to define a matrix X which should contain I1. Okay, we should contain I1. Or hindi na pala. kahit hindi niyo pa define yung ano, i-define yung matrix X. Okay, kahit hindi niyo na-define yung matrix X. Pero ang mangyayari diyan ganito. So you define A, okay, with this one. Okay? Hindi pa siya tapos. Kompleto naman siya, di ba? Tsaka nag-busy na siya, so ibig sabihin nag-execute na siya ng command. Okay. Anyway, so sige. You define A, tapos you define B. This one. So yung B niyo is simply V, okay, 0, 0. Now, you would in that case, you are now pag na-define niyo na yung A tsaka yung B. Okay, you are now ready to use yung yung backslash operator or yung left division na tinatawag. Okay? So, to do left division here, okay, to do left division, you simply command X equals A backslash B. Okay? Pwede nyo, ito, lumabas na yung matrix A ko. Ganito dapat yung itsura niya. Which, as you can see, consistent siya dun sa form nung equation kanina. Okay? In addition, you can define B as B 0, 0. So that should be your B. Okay? Now, here's the thing. Pwede nyo namang isolve ito, diretso na. A equals, ito na, medyo sinsolve ko na yung isang question para sa inyo. Okay, para mapaliwanag, so that I can actually tell how to read the results. Okay. So, X is equal to A backslash B. And that should give you these things. Okay. The answer there, that X should actually be a 3x1 matrix or 3x1 column vector. Okay. Yung first row niyan is I1. So, you can have I1 as the first row. Okay. That index 1 here. Okay. X1 means extract the first element of X. Okay. And that basically pertains to I1. Okay. So, yan yung I1 ninyo. Ito yung sinasabi sa inyo that MATLAB would actually return results that are not really readable at first. Okay? So, ang gawin nyo, type in pretty I1. That should make it more readable. Okay? Maliwanag ba? Okay. I2 is yung second row ng X. So, pwede rin diretso ito, pretty X2. Okay. X2 means yung second element ng vector X. Ayaw niya. Ayaw niya pa diretso. So, kailangan mo natin i-solve yung kailangan mo natin i-solve yung X2. Let's get X2 first. Okay. And then let's type in pretty I2. Yun. Ayaw niyang i-diretso. Sige. Maarte siya. Okay? So, ayan. And then what I was telling you earlier, halimbawa to solve for G1, which is I1 over B. Okay? Which is I1 over B. You have G1, okay, you have G1 equals yung I1 niyo, divide niyo ng B. It should give you this answer. And this is your transfer function G1. So, ayun, medyo tagalan siya. Okay, so sige. Habang nintay natin siya, I'll proceed with my discussion. Okay, pero ganun yung idea, okay? So, if you do this, you would have three columns. You would have three rows of X. So, yung first row nun, X1, okay, would actually pertain to I1. Okay, yung second row nun, X2 is for I2. Okay. And yung third row nung X would pertain to I3. And then you have pretty much the same steps that is covered in the previous iteration or the previous solution of this using Cramer's rule. Okay? Is this clear to everyone? Okay, so try to figure out now. Okay, try to figure out now how this works pag nandito na kayo pag ginagawa niyo to. Okay. And I'll leave these things with you as for your discretion. Okay, para maaral niyo pa siya ng mabuti. Again, I would like this to be a self-discovery exercise. You discover things for yourself first. Okay. Although what I am doing now is trying to lay out the foundations. Okay, so that you would know what to expect. Okay, when it comes to this activity. Okay. Now we shift to yung first part ng activity ninyo actually pertains to or actually deals with trying to use MATLAB in order for you to come up with a model. But that is not yet the model that we will use. Okay? Because in this regard, model or system models or system models in MATLAB or LTI systems, we call it LTI systems. LTI stands for linear time invariant. Okay. So LTI systems in MATLAB can be modeled, okay, using these methods. Okay, using these functions, TF, CPK, SS, and FRD. Okay, and this would result to a different data type. Okay, kapag if you use these functions to define a system model, it would result to a different data type than what is used here in MATLAB. I mean here in symbolic math. We are in the first part, we are using symbolic math in order for you to come up with a transfer function. Okay, but that transfer function is not usable. Okay, in the control system toolbox. It would not be your control systems toolbox would not be able to interpret those expressions because their data type are symbolic functions or symbolic elements. Okay? Para magamit natin siya or paano magamit natin yung functions under yung analysis functions at saka design functions under ng control systems toolbox. Okay? We need to have these transfer functions to be defined as systems inside the control systems toolbox. Okay? So kung ang function ninyo ay naka-define as sim. Okay, halimbawa itong I1 ninyo ay naka-sim. Hindi niyo magagamit yung control systems analysis tools. Okay, or the analysis tools under the control systems toolbox for this system. Okay, anong gagawin natin ngayon? Ang gagawin, ito pa, lumabas pala yung G1. So nakita nyo, no? Babalikan ko lang to. Nakita nyo, hindi nyo dinivide yung V, di ba? Kasi may V pa rin. Dapat kasi wala ng V yan. Okay, ang gawin nyo ganito. Let's use simplify. Ang in-expect kasi natin is dapat wala nang V itong G1 ninyo. Okay? So, ayun. So let's use simplify and then let's try 3T G1. Ayan, wala nang V. So ito na yung transfer function na hinahanap natin. Okay? And again, as I was pointing out, this G1 is a symbolic data. Okay? Naka 1 by 1 sim pa yan. What we need is a system that is defined inside the control systems toolbox. Para magamit natin yung system na yun or para magamitan natin siya ng analysis tools ng control systems toolbox. So, simply put, we need to convert this symbolic expression into into a system model. And for you to do that, you have 4 functions. TF, ZPK, SS, and FRD. So may iba-ibang ano yan, may iba-ibang gamit yan. What is good to use as when is TF okay to use, when is ZPK okay to use, when is SS okay to use, when is FRD okay to use. So may iba-iba siyang gamit. So I need you to learn those things here. Okay? Wala naman to sa lecture, hindi naman to part ng lecture, pero you need to learn it from here. Okay? Pero just to give you an idea. Halimbawa ito, maganda tong gamitan ng TF because you will be able to in TF kasi ang pinakamagandang gamit ng TF is if you can actually get the coefficients of the polynomial. You have your numerator and denominator defined as polynomial. As polynomial, okay? So if they are defined as polynomial, makukuha nyo yung coefficients. So simply put, we simply have to obtain the numerator coefficients and write it as an array. Say for example, this case. So numerator coefficients ito. So we write the coefficients in an array. So let's have 20, 10, 13, 10, and 1. Those are your numerator coefficients. And then let's get the denominator coefficients. 24, 30, 17, 16, and 1. Those are the denominator coefficients. Okay? Is this clear? Okay. Now, pagka nakuha nyo yung numerator at denominator coefficients, pwede nyo itong gamitin ng TF to define this as a system function or as an LTI system. So we use G1, lalagyan ko ng S ito para ma-differentiate natin siya with G1 previously defined. Okay, so G1S. Use TF and then num tapos then. Okay, so ang usage ko ng TF dito, okay, ang usage ng TF dito is it accepts numerator and denominator polynomial coefficients. Pero as you go along, madi-discover nyo na hindi lang ito yung and hindi lang yan yung way of using TF. Mamaya pakita ko pa. Okay, so enter natin ito. And then as we wait, ayun. Again, ang gusto kong i-take note nyo dito is yung pagkakaiba ng data type ng G1, yung una nating na-derive na transfer function, and then yung G1S, which in this case you can see now as ATF. Okay? You can see now as TF. So, there. Yun yung sinasabi ko na magpagkakaiba nila. Yung data type. Okay? So, G1, yung nakuha natin kanina, is in terms of symbolic variable. So, that is simply a symbolic variable. Okay? But if we have to analyze, for example, this system, we need to convert it into a system data type or TF data type. Okay? Ito kasi yun. Halimbawa, meron tayong analysis tool called STEP, which basically plots the step response or the output of your system to a step input. Okay. STEP is an analysis tool under ng control systems toolbox. Okay. So it can only process system functions. Okay. It can only process TF, ZPK, SS, and FRD models. Ito lang yung kaya niyang i-process. Okay. Other than that, mag-e-error yan. For example, if you type in step tapos G1S. Okay. Oh, wag na lang muna step. Ano na lang? Pole na lang. It computes the pole. of G1S. Yun na lang muna para mas mabilis tayo. Kasi ano pala yun, magpa-plot pa pala yun. Okay. So pole na lang. Okay. Again, pole computes the poles of the given system. And that system can only process, again, TF, JPK, SS, and FRD data types. Okay. So, may i-return siyang answer. And those are the poles of your G1S. Pero if you try to do that in a G1, which again, take note G1 is a symbolic variable. Okay? Makikita niyo yan dahil yung data type ng G1 ninyo ay sim, 1 by 1 sim. That should not work. Okay? Maliwanag yung gusto kong i-point. Is this clear? Okay. So that is why importante itong second part. This is where this second part is actually really important. Okay? Because even though you are able to get the model using the symbolic operations, if you cannot transfer it to a transfer function or a system model, okay, that can be accepted, that is allowed by analysis tools of the control systems toolbox, then wala ring silbi yung model natin sa taas. Kasi nga, hindi nyo rin magagamit yung makukuha nyo dito. What you need to do is from here, pag nakuha nyo, kung makuha nyo man, if you were able to get the model using the symbolic operations, you have to transfer that into one of these models. You have to transfer that equation obtained using symbolic operations into one of these system models. Okay? Is this understood? Okay. So now I leave into your discretion this activity. So I think I laid out the necessary things that you have to watch for, okay? When you are working on this activity. Okay? So I hope that you are progressing with your activity. I mean, as per my last monitoring, marami pa rin sa inyo ang wala pang gumagalaw ng activity. So I don't know what is happening right there. Okay? Marami pa rin yung hindi gumagalaw sa activity nila. So I don't know what is happening right there. But again, deadlines are fast approaching. Okay? We do not want us to be really tight on when it comes to due dates. Okay? But I also have some deadlines that I need to meet myself. Okay? May mga deadlines din ako kailangang i-meet. So if I am forced in a situation that I have to rush my evaluation of your work, I might be compelled on giving low grades kasi nagmamadali na eh. Siyempre, hindi ko lang bibigyan ng mataas na grade yung hindi ko naman nabasang report. Okay? So, ang tendency nun is baka mabigyan pa kayo ng mas mababang grade. Okay? So, what I mean is that as early as you can, please do submit. Okay? And para ma-evaluate ko rin ng maayos at ng fair yung papers niyo. Okay? And at the same time, makapagbigay din ako ng maayos na feedback, okay, for you. Okay? So, please do try to work on these activities. Okay? Ang discussion ko nasa activity 3 na. Okay? That's the fourth activity that we have. Although I don't think next week I'll be discussing the next activity agad. Okay? But again, yung susunod na batch ng activity ninyo would actually come in succession. Sunod-sunod na yan. Okay? So after this activity 3, may mga kasunod na yung activity 4, 5, and 6. Malamang. Okay? Because all of these activities are actually tied dun sa lesson. So kapag yung lesson kasi natatapos, i-deploy ko na rin yung activity nila. Activity associated with that lesson or with that topic. Okay? So there. I think we can dismiss today's sync session. Okay? May questions pa kayo? Gusto ko rin naman na mag-dismiss ng ayoko din nang paabutin 'to ng hanggang 9 kasi bukas medyo maaga pa tayo. Okay? Maaga pa tayong attend bukas ng ating Reforest 2020. So I hope I can see you tomorrow there sa ating sa ating forums. Okay? And be active in learning. Okay? Be active in learning. Try to obtain as much information. And again, itong mga topics na i-discuss na bukas must be of interest to you. Okay? It must be of paramount at if you're someone that is looking for an advocacy, aside from what you might be advocating for right now. Okay? Ito sana yung maging ninyo, maging isa sa mga advocacy ninyo. Okay? So kaya rin ako, isa to sa ginagawa kong advocacy ngayon. Trying to do some studies regarding the environment, although not necessarily about environmental sustainability. Okay? Try natin magkaroon ng mga analysis sa mga current data na meron tayo para makagawa or para makahanap ng problem and para mahanapan ng solution yung problem na yun. Okay, so yun yung isa sa mga tinatrabaho natin ngayon. Okay. Kasi nga ito rin yung isa sa nafe-feel ko that I would like to work on with. This is one of my advocacies, kumbaga. So kaya rin sana magkaroon din kayo ng advocacy and hopefully this is one of those things that you can consider. Okay, so let's dismiss the class now. Marami na ako nakakwento. Medyo gutom na rin ako. Thank you for attending today's meeting. Okay, and again, if you have questions about the activities or any concerns that you might have, please do send them to me. Okay? So, sige. Okay tayo.
Thank you po, sir.
Okay. Kita-kits bukas ha. Sana makita ko yung pangalan nyo dun sa
Thank you, sir.
Okay, sige.